august body of young men and women joining us for a little bit of learning here in the 9 days. We had planned that this was going to last in go a grand total of a half hour. That's about the max attention span that we thought people would be able to kind of muster.
I thought we said an hour.
Let us begin. Am I like the only one not hearing? Am I not hearing Rabbi Wald? Is that you guys hearing?
Can't hear me? Can you hear me?
You hear Benny Ram? Do you hear him?
I'm clear.
Hold on, let me see. Let me see if I can switch. Ari Stokel's helping me out here.
Headphones down. Maybe I think it was my fault. Okay, so let's get the show on the road here. Rabbi Wald, should we get started?
Hold on, I'm switching to computer.
Ooh, he's doing okay.
There we go.
Bold move.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, just like X out your phone. You're still on your phone.
I just X'd it. It takes a second to update. That much I know about Zoom. It takes a second to update.
All right.
Okay, now I can see everybody's faces. Nice to see everybody, or those who left their faces on. I would love to see your faces, people, but
I know. There we go.
Rabbi Kroll.
Yes, sir.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, Rabbi Kroll and I thought, as Rabbi Kroll was saying, what we thought we would do is maybe just talk to each other about things that were on our minds, ask each other questions, and let you guys be part of that process, and things that we were thinking about. We talked beforehand. Share some of our thoughts with you. So the first question I want to ask Rabbi Kroll when we were speaking is, I want to talk to him about fasting, and that's like what's on the flyer, so that's appropriate to start with that. And I think that fasting is something that we all find difficult to relate to. Aside from the Muslims who fast for an entire month, we don't see it that much. It's certainly not a prominent or highlighted feature of religion, and certainly not one I think that's celebrated in Judaism. If I were to ask everybody, like, what do you think are the highlighted mitzvot or features of Judaism, I don't think that fasting would be one of the things that would come up in everybody's mind. But when you think about fasting, it's on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, we're asked to fast. And on the saddest day of the year, we're also asked to fast. And I think that speaks to the importance and the centrality of what fasting is in our religion. And I think it's something that we should think about and discuss maybe, and hear what Rabbi Kroll's thoughts are. I definitely want to hear what Rabbi Kroll's thoughts are on why that's such a central feature, what its meaning is, and what meaning it is for us in modern day culture.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Wald. I'll try to address that for just a moment and hopefully give people something to think about as we get ready for it's tomorrow night already, right? I mean, I think we're all going to miss not being in the all the way down there together in that pavilion. Oh man, that barren pavilion is where we should be on tomorrow night. Alas, we will all be in our respective shuls or other various places, but we all will miss being there. So let's think a little bit, perhaps give a little bit of insight, maybe a thought that we can consider as we're approaching Tisha B'Av. I'm not sure I have all that much profound to say, but I'll share something I was thinking about. And if that, you like that, great. And if not, it's just going to be a couple minutes long. And I'll ask Rabbi Wald a question, and we'll get some of his wisdom. I was thinking about it in the following context. I remember this is going to be, I'm going to sound like an old man when I say that probably more than 25 years ago, when I was a student in Yeshiva University, I took a great class. One of my great classes was with one of my favorite professors at YU. He's still a professor at YU, Rabbi Shalom Karmi. Rabbi Shalom Karmi taught a class that semester. It was called Meaning and Evil. It's a philosophy class, Meaning and Evil. And in the class, he talked about a lot of problem of evil in the world. And one of the things he spoke about, we talked about, was the Holocaust and how Jewish philosophers understood the Holocaust. And he introduced me to a book that I'm sure some of you may have seen, by the name of I don't think he's not alive anymore. His name is Tzvi Kolitz. Tzvi Kolitz wrote a fictional account of kind of a conversation of a Jew in the concentration camp with Hashem. It's called Yossel Rackover talks to God, argues with God, talks to God, I forgot the exact title of it was. And so he wrote this. It's a marvelous little book. And he actually was able, Rabbi Kroll was living in New York City at the time. He brought him in and he talked about the writing of this book. And he talked about the book and he talked about something that he used a phrase that stuck with me. I want to share that phrase with you. If you remember one thing I said tonight, this one little phrase might be helpful. Talked about Hester Panim. Hester Panim refers to, like, God's, let's say, his, distance from us, his literally means the hiding of his face when we're in Galut. And he talked about Hester Panim in the following way. He said, don't think of Hester Panim as the absence of God's presence. It's not the absence of a presence, but perhaps the way to think about it is as the presence of an absence. Okay, what that means? Not the absence of a presence, but the presence of an absence. Now, that's actually, I did a little, that actually happens to be, but he borrowed that phrase from a French philosopher, Sartre. He uses that phrase in one of his books. But the idea of a presence of an absence is supposed to be a little bit of comforting. It's not like God has abandoned us. Rather, the idea of Hester Panim is it's like a conscious decision. He's choosing to make himself distant to us, and that's something that should be more comforting than to say that God has abandoned us. In other words, the presence of an absence. So I thought that was like a helpful thing when thinking about Galut, and also in thinking about God's role in things like the Shoah. And then I started thinking about it, and I'll just make this fast now. And we're talking about eating and fasting. I started thinking to myself, like, what is it all about when we fast on a fast day, like Tisha B'Av or Yom Kippur? Is it that we are not eating? Is it like the absence of eating? Or is it kind of like the presence of fasting? Is there something, is it just a refraining from the physicality? That would be, not eating. Or is there something like a little bit deeper going on in terms of the presence of fasting? And if so, well, I'd like to suggest that it actually is much more so. All fast days that we have, what gave Chazal the right to kind of like create fast days? Where did that come from? So I think comes from, I think the Chassam Sofer points out that it comes from the fact that they're all modeled after original Deoraitas. The Deoraita, there's only one fast day in the Torah, right? Purim, Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is the only fast. Yom Kippur is about v'initem et nafshedecha. It doesn't say lo tochlu or lo tishtu, right? V'initem. It's an essay. So it's almost like there's you're supposed to be doing something, afflicting yourself, and that manifests itself by not eating. So let's talk that for just 1 second. So what does it mean then? What might it mean to have the presence of an absence or the presence of fasting? How does that relate to how I think about why I'm fasting on Tisha? Now, of course, yes. Of course, it's true. We refrain from fasting. I'm not fasting. I'm not eating. I'm not engaging in physicality. That's certainly a component of it. But there's also something a little bit deeper. I've stuck with me very much. You guys know the halacha of an onain. When Rahman al-Islam, one of us is in a situation where a loved one, has passed away, and you sit shiva. Before you sit shiva, before the burial, one is an onain. One has certain restrictions upon himself. Amongst those restrictions, you're not allowed to perform mitzvot. Not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to say a bracha. Drink a cup of water, no shahakal. Not allowed. It's not like you're being frum if you want to be machmir and say the bracha. You're not allowed to say bracha when you're an onain. I remember once hearing it was very moving. My friend was discussing when he was sitting shiva for a parent of his, and he mentioned that it was the most startling thing in the world. Here he is, his whole life has been making brachas and everything, and then his parent passed away, and it was forbidden he couldn't help himself. Couldn't say, it was just like it was automatic. He had trained himself, and he realized that maybe one of the points of being an onain, of not being allowed to say brachot, was to put you in the mindset of being a little more reflective about why it is that we do say brachot when we're saying brachot, to appreciate it a little bit more. And sometimes you got to be startled and it's forbidden. You can't do it. When you can't do it, it makes you think a little bit about what it's all about. So if you can't do it when you're eating, maybe it makes you think a little bit about what it's all about. And I just thought two quick things. One, maybe what we're supposed to do is maybe we should have a little bit of an appreciation of the food that we eat. I mean, like, in okay, ma rabu ma'asecha Hashem kind of way. I'm saying this like I'd like to think about this when I'm refraining from fasting on Tisha B'Av. It's not. I'm not only talking. I mean, like, of course, churban abayit, galut, all that stuff. But there's also something about maybe I should do tshuva about the way I eat and the way I interact with food. You should think about that. Like, you ever look at how? I mean, it's going to sound dorky. Every once in a while, I look at fruit. It's like beautiful. You ever look at like a slice of watermelon or like an orange or like the best is like, like a kiwi? Like they're beautiful. You can't like make something. You can't bake something. With all due respect to people who bake beautiful cakes, nothing looks or tastes as beautiful as a piece of fruit. It's like incredible. Maybe be a little more mindful about that and to appreciate that sort of thing in a ma'arabu asecha Hashem sort of way. And the last thing I'm going to say is that something particularly I think may resonate with us as we're in these kind of crazy COVID times. There's something about, again, some of us, we eat on the run. You just run, grab a bite to eat and throw it in your mouth. You're running in the street. You got to eat quickly because you're always in a rush. That's a problem. Like, that's one of the things that makes us distinctly human, I think, is that we kind of sit down and we sit with friends and we enjoy people's company. We dine. We don't only, kind of feed. Before we started talking, I started looking at this. I have this book in my library called The Hungry Soul by a guy named Leon Kass. Leon Kass, some of you may have heard of Leon Kass. He's written a book about, he's not a frum guy, but he writes books on Tanakh. He's a philosopher, bioethicist. He wrote this book about eating, like the philosophy of eating. He's like, what makes people human different than animals? Animals just like eat. But humans, we sit down, you enjoy each other's company, you talk divrei Torah, you have certain customs and rituals at your meals, and sort of like that elevates us in a way that makes us distinctly human. And so perhaps I was thinking that as I refrain from eating, as a way of adding another component of meaning to my fasting and Tisha B'Av, to think about doing tshuva, about the way we eat. The presence of an absence, not just not eating so I can do other stuff. Think about what it means to be reflective of our eating practices, both in terms of appreciating the ma'arav masech Hashem, how gorgeous. I don't know, Rabbi Wald, what's the most beautiful piece of fruit you could think of? What kind of fruit's like gorgeous? I'm not hearing him. Is that me or is that him? All right, maybe my phone's not. Wait, Aryeh, is it me?
You can't hear him.
Oh, you can't hear him. Okay. He can't hear you, but you better figure that out soon, Rabbi Wald, because I'm like done talking because I've like said I've been like delaying a little bit. I mean, you better get your audio working, otherwise I'm like
I'm unmuted.
Oh, now you're good. Now you're good.
I'm good now.
Now you're good. Now you're
What I said I'm still. You asked me what fruit I think is beautiful, and I said I'm still focused on the kiwi that you mentioned.
Yeah, kiwi's quick.
I haven't had a kiwi in a while.
No, kiwi's delicious. I mean, I think that. I like berries are delicious and beautiful also. Again, a ripe, firm cherry. Oh, those delicious also. But
have you ever seen? We just planted in my side yard. We planted 2 blueberry bushes. Have you ever seen blueberries like when they're first growing the cluster? It's actually beautiful.
I didn't know blueberries can grow in this part of town, this part of the country, right over here.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of New Jersey blueberry. Oh, that's a good. Maybe I'll buy myself a blueberry bush. That's
maybe when I get a ripe batch, I'll invite the Krolls over to come pick with me.
That would be an honor. Well, this evening has been worth it already because I got an invitation to the Wald house to go blueberry picking. So that's great. It's good. Rabbi Wald, as we continue, kind of talking here, and I guess I'm done with my little schmooze thing. I'm happy here if you have any thoughts or reflections or want to disagree with things I said. I want to flip the question and ask you sort of like a different angle question. Like I sort of like you know, I think that one of the things that you and I probably encounter as we work with high school kids is that we always like kind of get a sense that it's important to make mitzvot in general very personally meaningful to kids. Like kids, like they like to do things because it means something to me, you know, and there's something that seems like nice about that, but there's also something that might be like offensive about that. And you know, as I think about like Tisha B'Av, I'm curious what you think about that sort of conflict. On the one hand, like you're supposed to mourn Churban Abayit and make it very much about community and like, you know, what we've lost, and that's something that doesn't very much necessarily relate to me. So in an effort sometimes to relate to it more, I'll try to make it much more meaningful. And it's like about stuff that matters to me individually. I don't know, what's the right thing? Is that like a weakness that we like pandering to kids by doing that? Or is that like the right thing to do for kids? Personally meaningful Tisha B'Av versus a kind of like communally, nationally important thing that's not at all about me. Like, stop worrying about yourself. Like it's not about the nation. Your thoughts and wisdom.
First of all, I don't think I've ever got to sit through a share from you. So this was a real, worth it for me. What a treat. And
just say it's better. This is a different vibe than those. Again, I may have a couple people who have been in my my shiurim in like Ada Bet, Ada Gimel, Ada Aleph in camp. But it's usually where I go to, you know, some people know my strategy. I see Rawson is on right now. Rawson knows my strategy very well, in which I go to Walmart before camp starts and spend about $150 on candy, and then just give candy out to all of my chanichim so that, you know, I bribe them to pay attention. This is like
one of the downsides actually of getting your bunk second month was that the first question was, A, are you going to be as good as Rabbi Kroll? And my answer was no. Right. And the second one, well, where's the candy? And I'm like, two losses.
Yeah, so maybe you can bring them blueberries next summer from your blueberry bush.
And by the way, the other big thing that I love about giving this year right now, besides sharing the time with you, Rabbi Kroll, is that I didn't know you spell Rawson's name Rawson. I didn't know that, so that's great. Okay.
A few things this evening. That's very good that you know that now.
Yes. So I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, the question about can I feel my own personal loss? And the reason why I think that's something that I want to talk about is because in camp, every year, you know, my association, I don't know how healthy this is, but my association with camp and Tisha B'Av, they're like intertwined. Like I always spend my Tisha B'Av so often in camp, and, you know, it takes me there. And when I go back to the second Tisha B'Av I ever, like, I think really like experienced, celebrated, but experienced in my life was I was a Machal camper. And I remember Machal kids, hysterically crying on Tisha B'Av. And I was thinking to myself, like, what are they crying about? Like, what are they, like, they know what that meant. The Beis HaMikdash means so much to them. And as like Tisha B'Av went on, and anybody who's kind of spent a meaningful Tisha B'Av in camp knows that it's highly emotional time. Like a lot of emotions come out. Kids share personal. It becomes very experiential and emotional in that way. And then I always kind of, as an educator, and as I you know, kind of evolved and grew, like, is that healthy? Is that okay for kids to like share their own personal tragedies? Is it a day of personal tragedy also on top of the loss of the Mikdash? And is that a healthy way to spend it? I can't see all of your faces, so I don't know if that's something that resonates with you. And I'm not asking you to turn on your cameras because maybe you shouldn't, but I'm just saying I hope that that's something that resonates with you because, you know, I think it's meaningful. Like, should we feel like, you know, I experienced this in my life, or I'm sad about this regret or mistake? Is that something that we should be thinking about on Tisha B'Av, or is it just about national mourning in the Beis HaMikdash? So the first thing that I want to say is, in general, and I want to be chas on your time, but I also want to be clear. I'm a big proponent in Yahadut overall that everything should be personalized and meaningful. I think it's the way that you know, we all practice the same mitzvos. And I remember hearing this from Reb Lachman one of my rebbeim from Karen Biavna, that we all perform the same mitzvot. We all are going to stand next to each other, hopefully, on Sukkot and hold the same lulav. And we're all going to sit on Tisha B'Av unless the Mashiach comes, and we're going to sit and we're going to read Eicha and Kinos. And you know, the differentiating feature that we should all be experiencing is, what does it mean to me? How is that meaningful? What does this lulav and esrog mean to me? We're all practicing it, but how do I serve God with this vegetable and this fruit? How does that connect to me and make it meaningful to me? There's a famous book by a sociologist named Peter Berger called The Sacred Canopy. And when I read it, it was like very gratifying. It's like an annoying academic book, but it's also like, it was very gratifying because he said that in order for all religions to survive, there needs to be something called legitimation. Legitimation means that one generation has to legitimize religion to the next generation. And if that doesn't happen, then religion sort of can get stunted and it will not thrive in the next generation. And I think that that's something that's incumbent. And how do, you know, Rabbi Kroll and myself as educators, I think, I don't want to necessarily speak on his behalf, but I think we're very much on the same wavelength for both things. So I would say, you know, when I connect to a religious issue or to a piece of Torah or to a mitzvah, and I'm able to communicate that feeling to my child or to my students, that has a better shot at being legitimated. And I think that one of the challenges with the Beis HaMikdash is, and Korbanos, it's so foreign that we have an obligation to, in certain ways, legitimate it and make it more relevant and personal for us. Otherwise, what are we mourning for? So that's like the start that I want to say. And I think that to split Tisha B'Av into two components, Tisha B'Av is really a hybrid of two different mitzvos. The two different aspects of Tisha B'Av, and I think that this might hopefully personalize it or start to, I want to give you the tools with which you can start to personalize Tisha B'Av. One of them is mourning. We're mourning what we lost. We're mourning that we had there was a mikdash, a Jewish state with that was governed by religious principles and that was headed with God at the center. We lost that direction. So that's number one. And number two aspect, and this is really important, is that, and by the way, that's highlighted by the fact that we sit on the floor, right? We're mourning. We don't say hi to our friends because we're in mourning. We're doing she'ilah. We don't do she'ilat shalom and say hi to somebody because we're in mourning. But there's another component of Tisha B'Av that is crucial, and that's tshuva. Right? We fast on Tisha B'Av, not just because we're mourning, but we fast because we're doing tshuva. It's a day of tefillah and tshuva, and that's something that, right, we caused with our errors and our mistakes as a people, God to, retract himself from the world, as Rabbi Kroll was speaking about, to cause a lack of presence. And I think tshuva, the mistakes that we've made, have led to, the feeling of absence, and that Rabbi Kroll was speaking about. And I think that any component of that is not healthy in a vacuum unless it's used to make us be better people. So in other words, like, the element of repentance and tshuva should be highlighted, and that's a very personal thing. What's my contribution to, God's presence not being felt in the world? What's my contribution? Am I not kind enough? It's not healthy just to beat myself up and to feel sad ever in Judaism, but to say, how could I be better? What does this fasting lead me to be a better person? That's definitely, I think, a critical element of Tisha B'Av, and that can be personal. The other element, just to go back to it for a minute, and the national mourning aspect that's hard to feel, I just want to share one other angle besides the Beis HaMikdash that I think is important, that I just stumbled on this year that I think might be meaningful for you in the national sphere of mourning, in the national loss. There's a Gemara in Megillah on Daf Lamed Aleph that suggests, as a Havamina, one of the Tanaim suggests that the Kriyas HaTorah that we should do on Tisha B'Av is Shlach. it's reading the Ched HaMeraglim. It's amazing that that's the thought, that on Tisha B'Av morning, that's what we should be focusing on. That we didn't want what God wanted us to want. We didn't want, and this is a B'nai Akiva thing. So here, God wanted us to take us to Eretz Yisrael, and we said no. And that's the possibility of what we should read on Tisha B'Av morning. I think is a very powerful thing. As a people, what are we choosing? What direction are we going in as a community? And that speaks to, I think, connecting to our national and our national concerns, like where are we going as a people? How do we connect? So I think that the personal element of, my own tshuva, my own repentance that I need to do, and plugging into the national, it's not just about the mikdash. It's about direction of our people and maybe thinking about what God wants for us as a people. And maybe that's two ways that you can kind of personalize your own Tisha B'Av experience and the mourning and the fasting that we experience. Good?
Shkoyach. Yeah, it's a beautiful idea, Rabbi Wald. I think that
maybe we should open up to anybody's questions.
Questions, thoughts, comments. You could talk about fruit. You could talk about blueberries. You could talk about Moshava on Tisha B'Av. You can ask Rabbi Wald about personal meaning and all that stuff.
You could talk about lighting paper bags in our, with a candle.
I feel bad about it. I feel bad that Aryeh Sokol is up at 2:30 in the morning.
What do you mean? He wanted to hear Rabbi Kroll.
I'm going to ask a question, and maybe I'll start it off. You both spoke beautifully about a lot of wonderful ideas. Maybe you have any practical advice. I think one of the hardest things about Tisha B'Av is, trying to block out the world around you and to focus on those things. Like you mentioned, Rabbi Kroll, fasting is great. But what are other maybe techniques or ideas that you guys have that can really help somebody focus a day and take the things that you guys were talking about and really internalizing them a little bit more?
You want to go, Josh? You want me to say something?
Your picture is better than mine in the flyer, so I'm happy to let you go first.
Where'd you get that picture from? Where'd you lift that from? I think that was a picture might be on the website at Katz Yeshiva High School.
Internet's wonderful.
Let's say a couple of things. One is that I'll give a very, very practical kind of thing right now is that I'm assuming one of the benefits of, many benefits of kind of the world we live in now with Zoom access to things is that there is a tremendous amount of Torah that would normally be completely inaccessible to everybody in this group right now, but is accessible now. Live stuff. Like you just Google different like shiurim, and different styles of presentations about keynote and that, and the beauty here is that you can do this from your home on Tisha B'Av, find the kinds of of shiurim or talks that will kind of resonate with you that you'll like. And here's the beauty. As opposed to on a regular Tisha B'Av, if somebody's giving a long speech that you find boring and uninteresting, you can leave and nobody cares and you're not hurting somebody's feelings. You can just channel surf and go to the next one. If you don't like the one, the OU one, go to the YU one. If you don't like the Moshava thing, go to there are multiple different opportunities for kind of inspiration. And that's novel this year. You never had that before. And I think that, I think people should before Thursday, or you can even do it on the spot on Thursday morning, spend some time and look around and see what the different educational institutions are offering and find something that you'll trying to be inspired by. And don't wait for somebody to inspire you. That's the biggest cop out. That's that's what the lazy high school kid says. It's nobody inspired me. Okay, stop it. Inspire yourself. So you're a big boy, you're a big girl. Find the inspiration. So I think that there's something to be said for that. I'm happy to offer some more things. I don't know, what would you got?
Yeah, that's great. First of all, I love that, and I think that connecting to, for teenagers, and I think for young adults like yourselves, connecting to mourning can be hard sometimes unless you've experienced loss. I think maybe one of the things that Corona has taught me. And maybe you can, be reflective on the distance that we've had and the experiences that we're experiencing now, in terms of loss, in terms of distance from the people that we don't have in our lives. I think that, really reflecting. I know we've missed so much because we've had to distance ourselves from people, and we've been limited to go and hang out with people like we normally do. I know that, one of the things that has become like very powerful for me in Corona, and reflecting on it, and there's been so many lessons of loss that you can get from it, is, I just can't go to Israel whenever I want now. That's like, so, one of the meaningful takeaways, like that I think Corona can teach us. Like, I can't go to Israel. What do you mean? What's going to be with Sukkot this year? And that's something that I've, maybe taken too much for granted. And I think that relationships in my life, that I've taken for granted, with students, with family members, with colleagues, are definitely reflection points of, loss and distance that I can definitely relate to, and maybe just meditating and reflecting on during Tisha B'Av this year, what Corona's taught us about that could be helpful also.
I think that there's, I'll throw one more thing in there. I just thought of it now. I wasn't really thinking of this before, but I started thinking in the context that I was talking about, thinking of the stuff that we refrain from on Tisha B'Av as not just like we're not doing something, but they're kind of like that, as I was using that similar metaphor of like the presence of an absence. It's like it forces us to be reflective about those things we're refraining from. So even something like Rabbi Wald had mentioned, She'ilat Shalom, you're not allowed to greet people in mourning. Like, what's that like? Like how many, like do we, like the experience of like ignoring somebody when you walk by them, should make us like be a little bit reflective about when we do She'ilat Shalom every day of our lives. How are we doing that in a way that makes the people who we're saying Shalom to feel good about themselves and like we should be proud of?
I remember in camp, Rabbi Kroll, you'd always walk by people and like somehow nodding is okay. But like, I agree. I think like holding back on the nod, like you are ignoring it's a very powerful thing, to not do that. I agree with you.
All right. Okay, listen, we look forward to seeing everybody, Bimheira v'yameinu, when we're all at the Kotel getting ready to bring Korbanot sometime soon. And if not, then we'll see you in Camp Moshava, next summer, whether it's first month with, I think now I move back to New York. I have to move back to second month, Josh.
I don't think you have a choice.
Yeah, I can't do first month. I can't. All right. Shalom, everybody.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you very much.
Tzom kal, everybody.
Good night.